Hi, folks, and welcome to the Star Wars Library, where Star Wars is in print, and the missus and I get to move, and you all get to see it firsthand. We're going to go ahead and pick back up with the Marvel Star Wars series, and going back to this, obviously we took a break last episode with looking at the newspaper strips, but we're going to go back to the Marvel books, and it's a very short arc that we're going to be talking about today. It's only 2 issues, and it kind of picks up right before issue number 24. And that's something I do want to mention is that if we were going through the EU in chronological order, we definitely would be bouncing around a lot more in terms of order of the series. But we're looking at it in publication order. That's one thing to keep in mind. So I will say this on offhand if you do intend to read, let's say, the EU in chronological order, or heck, just the Rebellion era in chronological order, you're going to have to be jumping around a lot from different Marvel issues because it's not all in order from the series. So just a heads up there. So anyways, we're going to be looking at 2 issues today of the Marvel series. And again, it's in a trade, so forgive me, I'm going to have to hold this up. Issue 25 and issue 26. Now, with this arc, it's kind of back to, it's a Luke and Leia centered. So remember, the last issue that we had before 24, Han and Chewie have gone one way, Luke and Leia have gone their way with the droids, and so it kind of bounces all around between, this arc is, or this comic or this story or whatever is focused on Han and Chewie. This one's on Luke and Leia, and eventually they're all going to come back together, back on Yavin and all that. So this is essentially Luke and Leia going back to Yavin. They've boarded Simon Gradeshade's yacht, and they've made their way to Centauri's. They get a new ship because apparently it's going to be a little bit harder for the Empire to track them in this one, and then they're going back to Yavin 4. Now, the thing with Yavin 4 right now is that Yavin base is actually being harassed by these frequent TIE fighter attacks, and the rebels can't find out why or whatever because they're not coming up on their scans. The TIE fighters just kind of show up, and then they're gone. They don't know, where they're coming from. And after they're gone, the rebels can't figure out where they've went. They just disappear. So they're trying to figure out, where is this? And so, and then also at this point too, the Empire is setting up their blockade, which we'll see in multiple other, pieces of media, to block the base because now they know, where the rebels are. And so we see that and in upcoming events there. So Luke and Leia finally get back in this arc, and they find that the Imperials are working with a guy named Orman Tag. Now this Tag guy, he was mentioned earlier in our chronology here in the Marvel series, and he'll become a little bit more of a more prominent bad guy as we go on here in the Marvel stuff. But essentially, his character was injured by Darth Vader, and he lost his sight. And so what's cool is that he has these cybernetic goggles that allow him to see. And ultimately, his end goal is to bring down Vader so that House Tag, who is who the Emperor turns to right now, take down Vader so that House Tag is who the Emperor will turn to. Because it's kind of like Shadows of the Empire, where Shizor wants to take down Vader and, and all that. But we'll get to that much later in our chronology here. But anyways, it's because remember in our chronology right now, this is still 1979, so we didn't know that the Emperor was a Force user. We thought that Vader was the only one who was part of that hokey religion or whatever, as Han Solo would say. And they kind of looked at Vader as kind of like a sorcerer in a way that was an ally to the Empire, and that's kind of why he was looked at as this power. Now, of course, you could explain that maybe that's, not everyone knew that the Emperor was a Force user. So, in the real world, or I should say, in the Star Wars universe world, it makes sense. But obviously, for us as the audience in the real world, again, looking at it in context, we didn't know that the Emperor was a Force user back in 1979. So, anyways, we'll obviously get details on the Emperor later on. So Tag is actually then practicing with a lightsaber. So it's kind of cool to see him practice with that, because he's like, this is how I'm going to bring Darth Vader down, is to best him, in his craft, if that's what you want to call it. So essentially, how does the TIE fighter thing work? Getting back to that. So basically, there's this giant ship, and Tag has hidden this ship inside of the Yavin gas giant. It's the big orange moon that orbits the planet, or the moon of Yavin. So how is that possible, right? It's a gas giant. So it's discovered that there's a large turbine that is inside Yavin, and the Tag family is put there, and it creates, these turbines creates these tornadoes or whatever, these cyclones, that creates an eye in the planet that the TIE fighters can fly through. They can attack the rebel base, and then they can fly back into the ship. So it protects them from damage, and it gives them a way to get out and get back in. So Luke and Leia ultimately find this out, and now they know this is how we need to take him down. And also in the process of this, R2-D2 is severely damaged, so he almost dies in a way. R2, he loses, I think he loses one of his legs, is blasted off or something. So R2-D2 in this is very damaged, and they don't have the parts to fix him on Yavin base. And that's what's ultimately going to bring Valens back. But I'm getting a little bit ahead of myself here. So that's in the next arc. We'll get to that. So Luke decides that he is going to go and fly into the gas giant, destroy this turbine, and then get out. Now, essentially, it's a suicide mission, because if there's no hole, it's very likely that he's going to die. So Luke, we see Luke at this point, he's consciously using the Force. He realizes that if I use the Force, this is going to be my way to free, to get free of the gas giant. So we kind of see it, kind of instinctively Luke uses the Force, especially in the Marvel stuff. But at this time, he's really trusting in it. He's actually consciously thinking, I need to use the Force to survive. So it's kind of cool. A lot of people like to dog the Marvel series, for sometimes some goofiness. And, there is some, it's definitely some, there are times when you're reading it and you think it's definitely a product of its time. But there is a lot of good in it, and there's a lot of good character development in it. That I think a lot of people don't give it, enough attention. And this is clear evidence of that. We see some character development in Luke, which is really, really interesting. And again, this helps explain, some more stuff, and that way, then it's a little bit more like, oh yeah, an Empire Strikes Back, when he is in the snow on Hoth in the Wampa Cave and he uses the Force, because he's it makes me think of this, that he's consciously thinking that the Force is going to be my way to escape and to get what I need to get done. So of course Luke goes in, and and it all ends well. Of course he doesn't die. We've seen The Empire Strikes Back, right? So anyways, is this an essential Marvel read? Here's the thing. For a modern reader, as someone who's not really reading the Marvel books, I would say, again, it's not one of those Marvel books that you have to go and be like, oh yeah, I have to check out. But in terms of an essential Marvel read, I think it is a really good read, and I think it's definitely something you don't want to skip over if you are reading the Marvel books. It sets up, the next arc, and it introduces Orman Tag. It brings in the blockade that, a lot of, I know it's been tackled in some video games and then other EU sources as well. So it is kind of a very, it's a significant thing. And again, there is a really good significance with seeing Luke, grow more into the Force. And so for me, as a Luke Skywalker fan, that's always great to see. But, for the overall Marvel series, it does set up a lot. It does, play its part, and it does a really good job at that. So again, if you're reading the Marvel series, definitely pick this up. I think you won't be sorry. I think you'll enjoy it. So anyways, that's all the time we have for today. Thanks for tuning in, folks, and I will catch you next time.